so much of women's work is invisible, and so much of the conflict prevention work is invisible. It's not only about the track one negotiations, the political process, it's about negotiating in communities. It's about walking
Yep.
between your neighbors' doors, about reconstruction, about forgiveness, about going on with life, integrated education. And that's a long-term journey. So the work, the impact of conflict and war on women is definitely multifaceted. And I've been able to see the huge opportunity and possibilities for women's leadership in transforming societies to address those root causes that got to war.
Although Ireland is home for Maria Butler, she has traveled the world and has noticed that the impact women have on their communities is commonly overlooked. As the executive director of the Nobel Women's Initiative, Maria collaborates with Nobel Peace Prize laureates to champion nonviolent solutions, justice, and equality. Thank you for joining Lynne Foley, host of Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories, as we hear from Maria about her journey.
Oh, so much happy memories. I grew up in a small village in Kildare, the south of Ireland. Both my parents came from farming backgrounds, like many. My mum was one of 14 from Wicklow, and my dad from Carlow. My dad qualified as a teacher, but he has an entrepreneur at heart. Um, so they started a business together and worked in partnership in our sitting room, and then our converted garage, and then our back shed. So I grew up around this spirit of ideas, I guess, partnership between my parents, and adventure in some ways. They adventured outside the scope of what others were doing in our village. My dad was a total joker, so that brings always a good laugh to us. And he actually passed away suddenly in 2010. And the days after he died, and then I found a little post-it, a yellow post-it in his wallet, and it said that it talked about his life purpose. So that was the sort of man it was. It wrote, "My purpose is to become one with my wild nature and to find my true path in life and to help others find them." And he wrote, "My purpose hangs over me like a veil." So he was a very funny man, but a very deep person. And my mom and dad had this partnership in business and in life. They call each other in Irish Anam Cara, which means soul friends. And many of us go through life with finding our soul friends and journeying through them. So I was lucky to have that in my home. And my mom is the sort of woman who, after this deep grieving, uh, just in the months afterwards, compiled a book where loved ones wrote stories of death. She published it nationally and internationally, and all the money went to charity. It was called Death Be Not Afraid, and people talked about the journey of death. So that's the sort of woman she is. Even in her deepest pain, she turned it into a healing process for the community. Um, I guess I was also, I got from both my parents this ability to question things. So I was the first female altar server in our village. And I would ask questions of power and our local priest. Um, I asked him once, "Could you be Pope, Father?" Uh, and he said, "No, I guess so, I guess so." And then I said, "Well, could I be?" So I was always acknowledging the power structures, I guess, even as a young girl, and finding ways to question them. And I took that with me throughout my life and journey.
Wow. So it's really interesting how that curiosity and the questioning and maybe even pushing a little bit or pushing back a bit about those structures happened when you were quite small.
Yeah, I believe
Mm.
so. Having young kids now, then I have a 1.5-year-old, a 9-year-old turning 10, and a 12-year-old daughter, Lillian. And absolutely, even from a very young age, the ability to understand values,
Mm.
what's right, in our common humanity and to be able to question things. It's absolutely critical.
So you grew up, I remember from our first conversation, during a time when conflict was omnipresent in the country of Ireland. And during this time, you travelled overseas with your family, where your choice of future study and career direction was formed. Can you please explore aspects of this time with me?
You're right. I grew up in the south of Ireland, and it was the times of the negotiations and violence in the north. And in a way, it was ever present in our daily lives, but far away, if you know what I mean. It was also, I was 6 years old when Mary Robinson got elected, the first president, female president of Ireland. And it was a pivotal moment in transforming women's leadership and the way we thought of women's power in the community. You know, Mary really approached leadership in listening, and she talks about how she did that at a community level and then at a national level and, of course, internationally. So she was a great inspiration for my life and growing up. And also traveling was a key part to learning for me, and I hope to pass that on also to my children. I remember, for example, one visit with my family. They were on a business trip, a conference. They took my sister Michelle and I to South Africa, and honestly, visiting the soup kitchen, visiting the community members, witnessing the stories of individuals really stays with me just after the apartheid era. Both the structural violence that we learned about as Irish kids, but also the poverty and the economic violence that paralleled the political processes was something that stayed with me forever. And I think formed a lot of my sense of who I am in terms of showing up, witnessing, and empathy, but also this deep sense of justice and injustice. And I think, young people, we choose school projects that resonate with us. And one of the ones I chose was to document the victims of the Omagh bombing, the people that had been killed in 1998 in the town of Omagh. And my mom and I and my primary school friend traveled on the bus to the north, walked around the village, and the approach I took, wasn't really methodological or reading theories, but was about their stories. And looking back now, after just returning from Palestine, it's also part of our methodology in the women's movement now, is to witness, to listen to the stories and lived experiences of those suffering, and to center those even beyond the geopolitics of our world, but to center the stories of our sisters and brothers. So I was lucky. Just one story. I studied human rights, a master's in human rights in London, and absolutely the way Mary approached using human rights in service, not in pointing fingers, but in connecting human rights with the work on the environment, connecting the work of human rights and law to serve the work for women in conflict, was something it just hits you and you say, yes, this is exactly it. They get it. She gets it. She's articulating it. She's doing it, not just writing about it. So when I was living years later in New York, around 2008, I guess, I walked by her then small office on Madison Avenue, and I went up and knocked on the door and said, I want to work with you. And I did. I ended up interning and then working with Realizing Rights, the ethical globalization initiative that Mary ran from this small office in New York City, along with doing other internships around New York. And it was phenomenal to see in person her work ethic, incredible, her dedication to the values and missions of her work. And it was a huge highlight and privilege for me to have the bravery to knock on doors, and then follow up and do the hard work, turning up every day and doing whatever tasks you get, and delivering beyond. So just share that story because it connects growing up with my journey in New York.
So to connect from where you grew up to New York, I know during your time at university you had opportunities to travel again, and you continue to influence and be inspired by that, particularly in supporting children in Kenya through your organisation, GRA.
So GRA was another pivotal moment for me in my life. I had volunteered in a rural community in Kenya, in the Rift Valley, living with a family and working in the community. Again, this is a community without electricity, without water, and quite rural. So my parents were very proud of me going back to my farming roots. My dad tells the story when, he was very worried when I got there and they hadn't heard from me. And I called him one night and I said, okay, I can't talk for long because I only have one one battery left. I won't be able to charge my phone till I go to Nairobi at the weekend. So I'm just talking to you quickly. It's late. He said, we just want to know you're okay. And then the phone went quiet. And I go, oh shit. And my dad was like, what happened? What happened? I was like, no, I stood in cow shit. So he thought that was the best story. He was like, oh, I can imagine you're on a small farm. It's dark. I know my daughter's going to be okay. So this was a beautiful community. I loved my time going to the school, sharing, singing Irish songs. But I also met brilliant people there. Diane Cheapo was one of them, running in women's empowerment and community work. A really remarkable woman, working in the community. And when I went home, we set a goal to save funds to send young students, girls, to secondary school. And then it grew like some beautiful things. We called it GRA, which means love in the Irish language. We had a kind of party with a purpose ethos. So young Irish people sending funds. And over the years, we supported many students to go to school, thousands to get feeding programs in school at primary school level, and other community initiatives that came up as we go. So this was a pivotal journey. Both the community we built 100% volunteer in Ireland as young students, in our 20s, and also the universality of love, which is what we were centering in the lives of who we were connecting with in Kenya. So I'm really proud of that work because it was pure solidarity and engagement work with the community in Kenya.
I formed a view that you're a true global citizen from getting to know you, and that you took more study and travel after meeting your now husband, with internships, work opportunities like the one you've just described with Mary Robinson. And over the last decade or more, this has taken you to where you are. How have you then got to your Nobel Women's Initiative executive role from there? Love to hear a little bit of that pathway.
I saw the power of community work and maybe also the boundaries, in that they don't always address the root causes, the geopolitics, the decision making. And therefore, it led me to work at the political and policy level to see how the decisions that are made in global forums impact communities. And it led me to working around the United Nations in New York. I did some work at the Irish Mission, and then started and worked for 12 years with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the oldest women's peacebuilding organization in the world, which has a phenomenal history, but is about addressing root causes of war and of structural violence. And I got to also work with really amazing leaders, community leaders and international leaders. The Secretary General was a woman, Madeleine Rees, who we worked together every day, used her voice as a whistleblower in Bosnia to call out the violence of the UN contractors and peacekeepers who were perpetrating sexual exploitation and violence against community members and women in Bosnia during the war. And we screened the documentary that tells the story of this. It's called it was a blockbuster film called The Whistleblower, inside the UN in my early days. And it was, I had great moments like that. I got to also work with another colleague, Ray Atchison, on bringing gender and women's rights into the Arms Trade Treaty. This was the negotiations of member states to control and regulate the sale of arms and ammunitions. Never done before this. Bananas are more regulated than gun sales internationally. That was the reality. And we brought to the table in New York the impact of guns, gun ownership, armament on women. Both the perpetration of direct violence, but also the threat of having a gun. And we were told early, we sat around, a small group of us told, this is naive, this is not realistic, it won't be in the negotiations. But a small group of people worked with member states, with civil society, and with a global network at the national level to advocate for the inclusion of a legally binding provision in the Arms Trade Treaty on the prevention of gender-based violence. And we succeeded in doing that, to both make visible the impacts of the arms trade on women, and also to call specifically for action on its prevention. So I got to do all different sorts of things. Every day and every week was different, whether it was working with Syrian activists to brief the Security Council for the first time in the early days of the war there, or on traveling to communities in Colombia and listening to survivors of sexual and gender-based violence after the peace process. I got to work with extraordinary women and men. We even started an initiative in WILF on combating militarized masculinities and working with men for peace. So this was part of my work. And from there, sorry, get back to your question, from WILF, which we affectionately called, and I moved to work with the Nobel Women's Initiative 3 years ago, and have the privilege of serving as the executive director.
And you're based in Geneva now.
Yes, I am. I'm based in Geneva with the family and the chickens and the dog.
And the chickens and the dogs, and working your way through raising your family and running a huge and interesting organisation. So let's move on to today. Your leadership at the Nobel Women's Initiative is based in influencing change, leading peace together, and shifting narratives. Can you expand on the work of the organisation and how you amplify your voice, your leadership, and utilise your gifts and capabilities to make the difference you seek in this current work, which of course is all about peace and continuing the work of supporting people who are in war-torn regions of the world?
Yeah, thank you. And the Nobel Women's Initiative really is a beautiful sisterhood. Over the history of the prize, 19 women have won, versus 100 plus prizes. But 20 years ago, 3 of them came together and said, let's use our collective power as women. And I think that symbolizes the type of leadership of women, to collaborate and to put the mission first. So I get to work every day with 8 extraordinary women Nobel laureates, from Guatemala to Yemen, from the Philippines to the US, Liberia, to Ukraine. And each of them have their own extraordinary story. But what we do is, when the laureates work together for women in conflict today, we work to take action and to center the action of local women peacemakers in different contexts. So the first month I started, we led and coordinated a delegation to Ukraine. This was in June 2022, just months after the large-scale invasion. We sat with women in shelters. We listened to their stories. We documented it through a beautiful documentary called Oh Sister, commissioned, made by Ukrainian filmmakers, and then we screened it all around the world with Nancy Pelosi in Washington, D.C., in Strasbourg, with European leaders, to center the stories and different stories of women. There's not one story. We had women fighting in Ukraine, fighting on the front line, women pharmacists, women human rights defenders documenting war crimes, mothers, daughters, activists, and to center their needs, their rights, and their political power. So that's part of our work. We also work to use different tools. We have a database called Interview Her, which is about calling the media to connect with women activists in times of news or headlines or other stories. And we also have a beautiful mentorship program called Sister to Sister, which gives me so much energy and love. And we've just launched our 2025 Sister to Sister call. And this year it's going to be in honor of Wangari Maathai, the Nobel laureate from Kenya, who had a beautiful vision to plant trees and to center the work of eco-peace building, ecofeminism for the future, a visionary. You know, that's what I think I've learned so much from the laureates individually and collectively about their vision, their commitment to their work, and also the service they have. And let me tell you, they also make me laugh. You know, some of them curse a lot at inappropriate times. I won't name who that is, Jody Williams, but they make me laugh. So they, you know, have a lot of love and care within the organization. And I see myself, you know, bringing my story, my talents as building bridges between in the laureate circle, between our sister circle. We have a philanthropy circle. I have an unbelievable global staff team that lift me up every day. So, you know, it's like connecting these circles and, you know, holding the energy between them to work for our mission and the service of the communities.
So it's it seems to me that it's a huge privilege to be doing what you're doing, but you're also adding your voice to the voice of the laureates, and you've got your own vision as well. So I'm assuming there are opportunities for your vision to feed into their work as well.
Yeah, exactly. As the staff team, we work closely with the laureates and their collective work, and we also have the opportunity to implement and propose work and co-create. You know, that's the space we're in and we're working on, and each context will depend. So on this recent mission, really important time, I think, right now to talk about the genocide in Gaza, the apartheid, the violence in broader Palestine. Going there in April 2025, myself and Jody traveled to the West Bank. We sat with community members, with women's groups, and listened and heard the stories of violations that happen systematically, and then to be able to work together with the laureates on follow-up. You know, I'm a very practical person too. So it's how can we follow up on what we heard? How can we take it to decision makers and to echo the voices of civil society? That this is really important to our strategy as partnership, is to work with those doing the work every day, and then to use the spotlight or the microphone or the lived experience, you know, the life experience of these laureates to provide solidarity, hope at sometimes the darkest hour, and to call for, in this case, an end to the illegal occupation and end to the violence. it's really critical and needed right now as we face so much around the world, a pushback on women's rights, a call for increased militarism, um, and an attack on the very basis of solidarity, I think, of community work, of values. It's so important that we look for third ways and we don't get caught in disinformation and othering, that we look for the bridge. And I think that's what I've been able to see with Nobel Women's Initiative, is to be able to look for allies, sometimes in unlikely places, and to advocate for peace, equality, and justice.
It's huge work, isn't it? And right here in our world, we all look at it. Some of us, you only get to look at it or hear about it, not be amongst it. So if I pick up on the fact that you've said already, you're a mum of 3 children, you're a senior leader, a senior executive leader, and you go into countries in war zones. So far, you've mentioned Ukraine and Palestine, West Bank. Given this lived experience, and of course your experience of growing up in Ireland when a conflict was really strong, can you comment broadly on the effects of war on women and children, and how the progress towards gender equality is affected by this?
Yes. Yeah, I think from many decades ago, women's lives have also been made invisible in war. And over the last 25 years, we have seen a centering spotlight of what are the experiences of women in war, and they are diverse, and they are many, but we know that in the peacemaking process, that women are almost always excluded unless they fight and knock on doors. And I think it goes back to that space. We have made a lot of the women's movement advocated for Resolution 1325 by the Security Council in 2000. And this was the first time the highest security body of our world recognized women and gender. So I tell people, that means there was 1,324 resolutions where they didn't. But that was one moment, I think, where they called for the importance of women's participation in peacemaking, because it is effective and because it also is based on human rights and the right thing to do. And then there's been a lot of documentation of women using different mechanisms. In Northern Ireland, they formed a political party. Extraordinary. And there's a brilliant documentary on this called Say Goodbye to Dinosaurs. It's a much watched. Wave Goodbye to Dinosaurs. And there's a brilliant series on Liberia, on Lema Bowie and the women's movement there, their journey, documenting the different ways in different contexts that women have been able to advocate for their participation. And when they do participate, research and studies shows that the peace is more effective and lasts longer. And indeed, it centers education, social services, inclusion, and other issues than laying down arms. There is I think from West Africa, a famous quote that says, ending war is not only about the men with guns negotiating with other men with guns. It's about the transformation of society, and that means all of society, women, men, and inclusive communities. So there are many ways that women need to be protected, and the risks they face in conflict, from gender-based violence, from domestic violence that increases during war for many reasons, but also to trafficking, and also to economic hardship as they take on more care roles in different society, different wars.
I'm assuming in there too, Maria, it's about, you mentioned about men with guns fighting other men with guns, then men lose their lives as well as women and children. And then more poverty comes if families are without the main wage earner and the support. And then they lose. It's just horrific, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yes, it is. And the whole community dynamic changes, whether it's through different phases of the war and fighting, where men are on the front line. And I remember, you know, when we are traveling in Ukraine, seeing these, you know, young men at the train station hugging their children and their wives, and the sadness for them. It's very difficult. And now 3 years later, you know, in Ukraine, you walk around Kyiv, their city is still functioning, but you don't see men.
No.
It's generational, the change, the impact. And yet when we come to now the let's say, hopefully in different contexts, a peace process, a negotiation, reconstruction, it is critical that women are included as meaningfully and powerfully in the negotiations, in the reconstruction process, because it comes down to, where are the road bills, where is the infrastructure, you know, where is the, you know, what sort of society, what constitution we want. And we know that from Ireland and our independence, um, uh, and the difficulty that different power take to reconstruct society in different ways. So yes, war in each context, I think I also want to underline, plays out differently. But what I've also seen is the power of women from Afghanistan, speaking with women from Guatemala's indigenous movement, speaking with women from Eastern DRC, and sharing their own tactics and strategies and stories. And I think as a movement working on women, peace and security, it needs to be valued, needs to be funded. We've gone through a period now of huge cutbacks across the international system. And what is also going to be cut is that really impactful local community work of women leaders. And that is critical to hold society and to prevent violence. I think that's what I've also seen, Lynne, is that so much of women's work is invisible, and so much of the conflict prevention work is invisible. You know, it's not only about the track one negotiations, the political process, it's about negotiating in communities. It's about walking between your neighbors' doors, about reconstruction, about forgiveness, about going on with life, integrated education. And that's a long-term journey. So the work, the impact of conflict and war on women is definitely multifaceted. And I've been able to see the huge opportunity and possibilities for women's leadership in transforming societies to address those root causes that got to war. I think that's what's key, as well as to look at the transformation potential and leadership of women at all levels, and in all contexts.
If only we can get those voices heard and those women at the right tables. I'm wondering,
Yes.
as we're heading closer towards the closure of our conversation today, can you delve a little bit into how you navigate challenges and barriers that you face, and where you find support and guidance when needed? Because your work is particularly works in a very emotional space.
I took over NWI in a process of organizational reckoning and transformation, and rebuilt the strategy and internal work. So organizational change, I've also learned from one of my favorite quotes is from the first American woman, Jane Addams, to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So she said, social advance depends as much upon the process through which it is secured as upon the outcome itself. And that really resonates with me in the budgeting work, in the fundraising, in the human resource work, that it also is how we do this work. And for me, it's about also centering our values in each of the operational aspects of our work. So my team, my staff team and I have been working on alignment hours every month this year, Lynne, as one example. So we're looking at the value of radical love, and, you know, also how that's tested in a very demanding workspace in a time of crisis and turmoil around the world, and war and violence, and how that works in our team and our community. So I have also learned a lot about navigating challenges and centering and keeping our values close when we're making decisions and when we're navigating organizational change.
That's lovely. So just as we head to wrap, what do you do outside of work that brings you joy and happiness and recharges you? What's your favourite thing
That's
to
a
do?
funny question. As you
Three
know, I have
children, a big
three
workload.
beautiful, joyous children that keep me very grounded and very busy and bring me joy in all the little moments, Lynn. So Lillian, Jeffrey, and Melanie are just, the center of what I do, and from when I wake up to when I go to bed. So they help me, I think, escape the work in many ways and make me laugh like so much. So right now, that's, I'm a busy mom, and that's what gives me great joy.
So to wrap up, what's a message you'd leave with anyone who's watching us today or listening to? What's your message for us?
Right now, I think my message is around voice and finding and being true and embracing the power of your own voice. And supporting others with being able to speak honestly, with love, and truthfully, using their voice.
Maria, it's an honour and a privilege to be in conversation with you today and to get to know you even for a short while. Zonta International thanks you for your time and generosity. Go well and safely into the next part of the adventure in your work.
Thank you, Lynne. Thank you.